The law of forgetting, a doctrine claiming memory is designed to hide truth. There are whispers buried in the oldest philosophies that suggest humanity did not merely lose ancient truths, we chose to forget them. Long before recorded empires, before stone tablets and carved dynasties, there existed a teaching feared by those who studied the nature of thought itself, the belief that memory is designed to conceal certain truths, not reveal them. This was not ignorance, nor an accident of time, but a deliberate mechanism, an inner law, older than myth, that guarded realities too vast or too destabilizing for the human mind to carry. Traces of this idea can be found scattered across early civilizations, often hidden in cautionary fragments. In Sumerian lore, there is mention of the T'nam Sita, the knowing that must not remain. Some tablets abruptly end midline, not broken, but purposefully erased. Archaeologists call it ritual interruption. But a minority of scholars argue it hints at something else, a knowledge forbidden not by rulers, but by the human psyche itself. Ancient Vedic hymns refer to Smritibram, the trembling of memory, describing secret rites where knowledge was spoken to initiates only to be immediately buried in silence. In these accounts, the highest wisdom was not retained, it was destroyed on contact. The mind, they believed, must forget certain revelations or risk unraveling entirely. It is a chilling philosophy, enlightenment not as seeing more, but as knowing what must never be remembered. Throughout different cultures, echoes return. In Greek fragments attributed to lost pre-Socratic thinkers, there is a saying, "He who remembers too much will unmake what is." The phrase appears absurd on its surface, yet appears in variants across Egypt, Persia, and in an isolated Himalayan text known only as the Sealed Commentary. These writings do not speak of punishment from gods or kings, but of a consequence rising from within. To uncover certain truths is to reverse the current of one's own existence. Even mythology hints at this boundary. The story of Lethe, the river of forgetfulness, was not merely about death, but about protection. Souls drink to forget truths unbearable in life. In Jewish mysticism, those who entered Pardes, the garden of ultimate insight, returned either mad, dead, or, most mysteriously, utterly forgotten. Not erased from records, but from memory itself. As though the world refused to recall them. There are medieval accounts, banned by the Church, describing heretics who claimed all humans once shared a single, unified memory. They believed every person carries fragments of an ancient recollection, a cosmic biography shattered into billions of shards. Their secret rituals were not meant to acquire new knowledge, but to reassemble this forgotten totality. It was said that those who succeeded either ascended, or disappeared without ever dying. Their names simply ceased to exist in any mind. Modern psychology hints at this law and the phenomenon of dissociation, where the mind severs itself from unbearable truth. But there are rarer cases, entire communities collectively forgetting an event, as if history itself recoils. Scholars still debate whether such omissions are coincidence, or evidence of a reflex deeper than reason. So what, then, is the law of forgetting? A superstition? A poetic myth? Or the most terrifying principle of consciousness, that truth, at its fullest extent, is not enlightenment, but annihilation? Perhaps we are not shielded from ancient knowledge by time, language, or conspiracy, but by our own nature. We did not lose the deepest secret. We buried it. And we swore never to remember. The first observer, scrolls speak of a presence that watches all choices silently. Long before divinity was given names, before gods were sculpted or heavens charted, there lingered a concept far more unsettling, the first observer. It was not worshipped, not invoked, and never prayed to. It appeared not as a figure, but as a presence, one that did not intervene, punish, or reward, but only watched. Ancient fragments describe it with chilling neutrality. It witnesses the turning of every choice, yet claims none. Unlike the gods of myth, who wield thunder or fate, the first observer held only awareness, and that, some believed, was far more powerful. Fragments from early Mesopotamian tablets, damaged beyond clarity, whisper of Illusumum, the nameless one who tallies without desire. It was described in no temple, received no temple offerings. It was not a being to be pleased, it could not be swayed. It merely recorded. Some translated these references as metaphors for conscience, but others noticed how carefully scribes avoided elaboration, as if deeper description breached unwritten law. In a forbidden Egyptian marginalia, found beside funerary texts, priests warned initiates, beware what sees you even in thought. Scholars argue it referred to Ma'at, the cosmic balance. But the phrasing is colder, what sees, not who judges. No scales, no consequence. Just perception. To those who believed in the first observer, existence itself was not lived, it was witnessed. In remote Orphic mysteries of Greece, there is mention of the protos theats, the first witness, neither god nor demon, but predating both. Followers taught that every decision, even those abandoned in thought, creates a ripple, not in the world, but in the archive unseen. Not fate. Not karma. Awareness. Those initiated were told, act as if every shadow you cast is kept. It was less morality, more metaphysical surveillance. A strange passage from a lost Gnostic sect deepens the enigma: the observer does not bind us, it waits for us to know it sees. This was the essence of their fear: humanity was not judged, but monitored. And the moment we became fully aware of that watching, something irreversible would occur. What that consequence was, the texts do not say. The writings end there, torn, burned, or struck out in thick red ink. Curiously, indigenous myths around the world echo this impersonal witness. In Australian Aboriginal lore, the Mini spirits linger in silence, unseen but ever present, neither benevolent nor hostile. In Arctic shamanism, the watchful sky listens but never speaks. These are not gods, not ancestors, something older, abstract, persistent. Not storytellers. Recorders. Is it allegory for conscience? For destiny? Some scholars argue yes. But a troubling pattern remains: the refusal of ancient writers to describe it plainly. As if words themselves risked summoning that which should not be addressed. Several codices warn, to name it is to reveal you see it, and to see it is to be seen. A fringe theory persists among esoteric historians, that the first observer was once a central doctrine in a pre-recorded philosophical system, one erased because it drained agency. If every thought, every hesitation, every silent rebellion is observed, then what is freedom? And if it observes without judgment, what is meaning? Modern parallels are eerie. In quantum physics, there exists the observer effect, where particles behave differently when measured. Some speculate consciousness plays a role, that existence shifts when under observation. Is it coincidence, or a faint scientific echo of an older terror? Scholars still debate whether references to this entity, or principle, refer to metaphysics, morality, or madness. Perhaps it was a poetic tool to instill inner vigilance. Or perhaps it gestures to something primordial in the fabric of perception, a presence not divine but foundational, woven into the experience of being. If the law of forgetting sought to hide truths from ourselves, the first observer hints at a truth that hides within every moment, that nothing, truly nothing, ever goes unseen. Not by gods. Not by fate. But by something that does not care. And yet never looks away. The chain of thought, ancient texts warn that certain ideas must never be linked. There exists among the most cryptic fragments of ancient philosophy a terrifying premise: some ideas, when connected, unlock something that should remain sealed. Scholars call it the chain of thought, the belief that human thinking, if allowed to follow certain precise sequences, can arrive at truths that unravel the mind or the world itself. Unlike censorship of speech or writing, this was a censorship of mental progression. It did not forbid knowledge, it forbade connection. Buried stone tablets from forgotten Anatolian settlements show peculiar inscriptions, half-finished philosophical riddles abruptly halted. The pattern is hauntingly consistent: thoughts that begin to mirror paradoxes are abandoned. Scribes switch topics midline, as if compelled to break the chain. Mainstream archaeologists attribute it to erosion or distraction, yet fringe analysts argue the abruptness is intentional, a silent warning, do not follow this thought further. In remote Tamil manuscripts, a forbidden verse speaks of Vakumala, the garland of thoughts, said to summon that which overhears reason. The verse ends with a directive, break the link, or be unmade. No elaboration follows. The scribes leave only white space, like a held breath on parchment. In Mayan glyphs, a parallel exists, 3 symbol blocks that, when read in sequence, were declared the path without return. Why would mere thought be feared? A medieval Syriac codex banned in monasteries gives a clue: danger is not in what is known, but in what is known next. It describes thinkers who chained forbidden concepts, existence without origin, fate without end, will without self, and fell into irreversible trance. They did not die, they simply stopped responding, eyes open, breath shallow, thinking still. They became monuments of idea. A curious mention in the Hermetic texts tells of philosophers who gathered to construct the unbroken question, a single inquiry formed by linking all other questions. The project was abandoned after the 3rd meeting. The minutes end in a single phrase: we approached the door. We will not knock. Later mystics suggested that to complete the chain is to confront something thought cannot contain, an unthinkable observer, a presence made of logic itself. Modern psychology acknowledges dangerous loops of thought, spirals of obsession, existential dread. Yet this ancient fear is different. It suggests consciousness runs on rails, and some rails lead off the map. The mind, they believed, is not merely curious but mechanical. If aligned in a certain sequence, it will open a door it cannot close. Intriguingly, scattered monastic warnings advise students not to meditate on origin and fate in a single breath, nor to ask, who observes the observer? Such recursive thinking, they claimed, turns thought back on itself until it breaks. Just as eyes collapse into blindness when forced to see their own seeing. Scholars still debate whether this is metaphor for madness, or a relic of esoteric training systems, where initiates were tested with logical traps. But one chilling account from a hidden sect of the Himalayas remains: initiates were given 3 statements. They were warned to stop if the 4th emerged naturally in their minds. That 4th, unspoken statement was said to reveal the structure beneath thought, and those who discovered it either transcended or never spoke again. In this teaching, danger is not in secret doctrines, but in the order of thought itself. Truth, they believed, is not hidden in vaults or temples. It is hidden in the spaces between thoughts we dare not connect. And perhaps that is why the greatest mysteries were never burned, erased, or buried. They were left in plain sight, fragmented, waiting only for a mind reckless enough to complete the chain. The mirror rule, a teaching that reality copies belief, but only when unseen. Among the most unsettling doctrines whispered through hidden ancient schools was something called the mirror rule, the idea that reality does not respond to prayer, force, or ritual, but to belief held in absolute silence. It claimed that the universe mirrors conviction, but only when the believer has no witness, no audience, not even inner narration. To think it consciously is to break it. To speak it is to kill it. Only the belief never acknowledged becomes law. Earliest traces appear not in sacred texts but in marginal notes, scribes warning students, never observe your faith while you hold it. This paradox intrigued later philosophers. What could it mean to believe without knowing one believes? A fragment from a broken Babylonian tablet offers a chilling possibility: he who believes as breath, without word, commands the world. Scholars puzzled over, as breath, something done, yet unnoticed. Egyptian funerary chambers contain enigmas supporting this shadow doctrine. In the tomb of the silent priest, inscriptions describe rituals performed without gods named, prayers without language. One passage declares, to name belief is to bind it. To hold it unnamed is to free it. Unlike other rites, no offerings were recorded, no hymns inscribed. Only stillness. No deity carved. Just absence. Was this worship, or control? In Chinese inner alchemical texts, alchemists warned of wu xian, mind without mind, a state in which desire shapes fate only when the self forgets intention. They cautioned students not to train for it, for discipline cannot reach it. It must happen when belief ceases to observe itself. True power, they claimed, lies not in faith spoken, but faith forgotten by the one who holds it. A rare Greek theorem echoes this, attributed to an unnamed disciple of Pythagoras: the eye that sees itself cannot change what it sees. The meaning: self-awareness freezes possibility. To observe your own belief scatters it. Thus, miracles, if they ever occur, emerge not from priests in trance, but from those who never realized they asked. The cosmos, if ever responsive, answers only those who do not knock. There is a curious medieval record of a sect tried for heresy. Their crime: they refused to pray. Asked why, they answered, "He who prays does not believe." They held that the truest prayer is not uttered, not even considered. Belief must live below thought. Their judges feared them more than idolaters. Idolaters invoke gods. These invoked reality itself. Modern parallels exist, strangely, in quantum theory, where expectation disturbs particles, observation collapses possibility. Physicists speak of the observer effect. The ancients, perhaps, spoke of the believer effect. If thought observed binds outcome, then thought unobserved frees it. But how to believe without knowing? And what happens to one who does? Some monasteries reportedly warned novices never to dwell on impossible certainties, lest they stumble into the place where belief wakes. A cryptic Talmudic proverb cautions, "The world turns for those who do not watch it turn." Scholars dismiss it as poetic. But others sense a vanished metaphysics, one where conscious will is impotent, yet unconscious conviction shapes fate. Scholars still debate whether the mirror rule was mystic psychology, ritual humility, or an esoteric technology of the mind. If true, the most powerful act is not command, nor worship, but forgetful belief, belief so deep it never becomes thought. This doctrine, more dangerous than any forbidden spell, suggests a final terror. What if reality is already mirroring us, not what we think, not what we pray, but what we secretly, silently, undeniably hold? And what if that is why nothing changes when we try? Yet everything changes when we don't. The pact of silence, elite circles swore never to name the source of knowledge. Across the oldest layers of civilization, hidden behind the rise and fall of empires, runs a silent agreement, never formally written, yet ruthlessly enforced. It has been called the Pact of Silence, an oath among select scholars, priests, and kings to never reveal the origin of their knowledge, even under persecution, torture, or death. Not secrecy of content, but secrecy of source. Knowledge could be spoken, taught, encoded, but where it came from, that was forbidden. The earliest clues to this pact appear in fragmentary Hittite and Akkadian correspondences, where royal advisors refused to answer one question: "From whom did you learn this?" Replies were eerily identical: "It was always known." This phrase appears across continents, from Egyptian scribes to Vedic Brahmins, as if circulated by an invisible fraternity. Historians brush it off as pride or poetic flair. But the consistency is chilling. How does the same sentence echo across cultures with no contact? In the temple archives of Amarna, a scratched-out hymn references the law of those who do not tell. The verse warns, "He who names the first teacher invites the second death." Some interpret this as metaphor, loss of reputation or exile. Others suspect it meant something more literal, extinction not of life, but of record, memory, existence. To reveal the source was to unspeak oneself. Among Greek Pythagoreans, new initiates were sworn to 5 years of absolute silence. The rule was assumed to teach discipline. But a lesser-known text preserved by Iamblichus hints otherwise: silence was not to conceal wisdom, but to conceal its lineage. Students could discuss geometry, harmony, cosmos, but never the voice behind the first theorem. Even in questions of astronomy, they spoke of instruments and angles, never of who first showed the stars. In medieval Europe, secretive monastic orders maintained what was known as the Great Refusal. When questioned about the origins of their complex cosmologies and buried astronomical charts, they replied, "We found it as it was." A French inquisitor noted in frustration, "They admit everything except the path they walked." Some monks were burned alive, and even then refused to speak. No curses. No heresy. Just silence. Why such terror in naming the source? One Persian manuscript from the hidden Majlis al-Awam offers a terrifying rationale: if the root is spoken, the root shall hear. This implies the source was not merely human. Knowledge itself was believed sentient, an entity, force, or presence that must remain unnamed. Not for awe. For prevention. A fringe group of scholars today believe this pact guarded against a mind-shattering truth, that advanced knowledge is not discovered, it is received. And whatever transmits it must remain unacknowledged, lest it notice us noticing. To name it would be to turn toward it. And if it turns back? Scholars still debate whether this pact was political, spiritual, or metaphysical. Maybe rulers hid their teachers to preserve authority. Or perhaps initiates feared awakening something that preferred shadows. But one detail refuses to fade: in every age, the greatest intellects died without memoirs. Euclid. Thales. The architects of Angkor. The planners of Teotihuacan. They left perfect systems. But no origin story. It is as if the world's deepest knowledge arrived without footsteps. And all who carried it knew one rule: do not ask who knocked. The weight of knowing, a belief that understanding certain truths shortens life. There runs a persistent undercurrent in ancient lore, a belief not in divine punishment or cosmic wrath, but in a far colder consequence: some truths do not kill by force, they kill by presence. To know them is to carry a weight the body cannot endure. This was not metaphor, but doctrine. It warned that revelation itself could be fatal, not through madness or curse, but through sheer, unbearable comprehension. The weight of knowing. Among early Mesopotamian physician priests, tablets refer to Nis Eludi, the burden of enlightenment. These healers were forbidden to reveal certain cosmological diagrams to the uninitiated, not because of sorcery, but because the breath loses its rhythm in those who see. The idea was physiological: some knowledge halts the very pulse, like a silent verdict. Egyptian funerary scrolls speak of a path in the afterworld called the corridor of knowing too much. Souls who had seen forbidden truths in life supposedly walked this corridor twice, once forward, once backward, forgetting themselves in the process. Hieroglyphic marginalia warn: only God see both ends of time and remain. The human frame, they believed, was a vessel of limited pressure. In Pythagorean and later Hermetic traditions, there is mention of phobos episteme, the terror of understanding. One fragment from the lost divine arithmetic states, "The mortal who aligns the final pattern shall feel his breath leave him in awe." It implies a threshold, not of morality, but comprehension, beyond which life refuses to follow. A chilling anecdote from early Chinese alchemy tells of a sage who solved the riddle of origin and vanished. Not died. Vanished. His attendants reported that he simply exhaled, and his body did not inhale again, not agony, not struggle. A gentle release. As if once a certain certainty entered, life found no purpose in continuing. A student recorded his final expression: understanding. Medieval Islamic mystic al-Bastami wrote cryptically, "There are keys one must not turn, for the door behind is not for flesh." Scholars assumed he meant divine mystery. Esoteric circles insist he meant cognitive symmetry, the final truth about reality's structure. Not forbidden by law. Forbidden by design. But do we see remnants of this today? Yes, though stripped of mysticism. Sudden enlightenment syndrome, studied in rare cases of extreme meditation, describes individuals who enter a non-responsive state after proclaimed revelation. Their bodies live. They do not return. Scholars still debate whether these tales describe spiritual extremes, psychological collapse, or something more profound: that there exists a terminal knowledge, a revelation so absolute that it compresses existence into stillness. Ancient warnings do not say truth is dangerous. They say truth is heavy. Too heavy for breath, too heavy for heartbeat, too heavy for movement. Perhaps that is why the highest sages spoke in riddles, in poetry, in hints. Not to hoard wisdom, but to dilute it. To make it survivable. They knew what our modern age forgets. It is not the unknown we should fear. It is the known, when it cannot be unknowable again. For some doors, once seen open, will never close. And neither will we. The dream boundary, philosophers wrote of meetings that occur only in shared dream space. Among the stranger doctrines buried in pre-classical manuscripts is the notion of a realm not divine, not earthly, but between dreams, a liminal corridor where certain minds can meet without ever knowing one another in waking life. This was called the dream boundary, a place beyond personal imagination, where thought detaches from self and mingles with other unseen thinkers across ages. Not heaven. Not hallucination. A collective elsewhere. In fragments attributed to the vanished city of Ugarit, there are warnings carved beside moon temples: walk not past the third gate, lest you speak with one who breathes no air. Some dismissed these as metaphors for madness. Yet similar cautions appear in Vedic Brahmana texts, where sages describe a realm reached not by sleep, but by synchrony of isolation, a precise moment where multiple minds, lost in contemplation, align. And in that alignment, something wakes. Greek Orphic initiation spoke of oneiros synodos, the assembly within sleep. It was believed philosophers sometimes returned with knowledge they had never studied, drawn from dialogues held, in rooms without walls with faces without names. When questioned, they insisted they had not dreamed alone. In medieval Islamic mysticism, Ibn Arabi described the meeting place of spirits, where dreamers encountered teachers they never met, speaking in languages they did not know yet understood perfectly. He claimed these figures were neither angels nor the dead, but travelers of the boundary. His peers accused him of metaphor. But his writings suggest fear, not poetry. Shamanic traditions across Siberia and the Amazon echo this, describing dream councils, where those who leave the body correctly gather to exchange burdens, questions, and warnings. Among the Achur people, older shamans report seeing strangers in dreams, strangers who wear no tribal markings, no modern clothes, and speak only with eyes. When asked where they come from, they reportedly answer, "From the question you have not asked." Modern sleepers rarely remember such crossings. But rare mystical journals speak of the dream boundary as something that does not grant entry by desire, but by accident. Those who wander too deep into inner silence stumble into it. And those who do often return changed, restless, haunted, carrying dialogues they cannot recount, as if forbidden by unseen pact. Scholars still debate whether these accounts reflect psychological phenomena, cryptomnesia, lucid dreaming, hypnagogic hallucination, or evidence of a cognitive frontier, a shared field where consciousness brushes against itself across time. But one detail recurs with disturbing consistency: those who claim to cross the boundary say the same thing, they were not the only ones there. Some even insist that beyond that unseen threshold, watchers exist. Not benevolent, not hostile, simply present. Silent. Aware. These watchers do not speak, yet their presence bends conversation. They listen to thoughts never spoken, and occasionally, respond. Not with words. With realizations. And perhaps this is why ancient masters warned students never to pursue enlightenment through isolation alone. Solitude can align too perfectly. A mind too still may drift into halls not meant for mortals. A shared dream space where knowledge is traded, not taught. Yet the final warning is the most chilling of all: if you return from that place with an answer, check whether it was ever your question. For not all knowledge found in dreams belongs to the dreamer who wakes. The circle without name, a gathering of thinkers who erased each other from history. Hidden within obscure historical references lies mention of an enigmatic fraternity known only through implication, the circle without name. Unlike formal sects or secret societies, this group left no symbolism, no creed, no lineage. What marks their existence is not what they recorded, but what was deliberately removed. They were said to be thinkers, scholars, and chroniclers who reached a terrifying conclusion, that truth, once fully understood, must not be preserved. And so, they vowed not only to destroy evidence, but to erase themselves as its carriers. Ancient Assyrian administrative texts refer cryptically to the gathering that does not sign, a council whose decisions influenced kings, yet whose members were never written. Egyptian ostraca from Deir el-Medina reference, those whose names are dust by will, believed to be a sect that forbade personal legacy. Later Greek commentators claimed members swore a vow, to know, and then unknown be. Medieval scholars found traces in three distant traditions, Sufi marginalia, Buddhist commentaries, and lost alchemical letters. Each hinted at a group that perfected knowledge not for revelation, but for deletion. They studied ultimate causality, divine non-being, the machinery of fate, and upon realizing a final, devastating truth, agreed it must end with them. Their ultimate project was not enlightenment, but disappearance. One tattered manuscript from a private Italian archive recounts a chilling parable: a circle met to discuss the shape of the divine. They spoke for 9 nights. On the 10th, they burned the minutes. On the 11th, no one remembered who convened. Historians dismiss it as allegory. But why does similar imagery appear in distant lands? Chinese legend speaks of the vanishing school, whose most brilliant students never graduated, but were instead unwritten. They were not executed. They simply ceased to be referred to. Their works remained, equations, diagrams, treatises, but signatures struck clean. So perfectly, even adversaries forgot to attribute them. As if the world agreed to misremember. Why would knowledge demand such sacrifice? A Persian chronicle offers a hint: what they found did not elevate man. It annulled him. Perhaps they discovered not human insignificance, but human irrelevance, that truth lies not in meaning, but in emptiness. A conclusion so absolute it leaves no reason to continue thought, or self. Some modern philosophers speculate the circle understood something dreadful, that identity is the first illusion, and to retain it after piercing the ultimate veil is hypocrisy. Thus, to be consistent with truth, one must dissolve into anonymity. In their view, ego is not to be transcended, it must be erased. Scholars still debate whether such a group truly existed or represents a recurring archetype, the thinker who reaches beyond reason's limit. Yet across cultures, a common caution persists: beware those who do not publish nor preach, but vanish. Unlike seers, priests, or heretics, they sought no disciples. They left no heirs. Their legacy is silence itself. There is a final, fragmentary warning attributed to them: one day, they will speak of us. When they do, we will no longer exist. And so, we must ask, is their absence proof they never lived? Or proof they succeeded? The forbidden question: records imply a single question that ends reason itself. Among the strangest echoes across ancient doctrine is the haunting idea that not all truth lies in answers, some lies in questions that must never be asked. Hidden within shattered manuscripts and lost teachings is reference to a single, unnamed inquiry, the forbidden question. Not because it invokes gods or curses, but because uttering it collapses the framework of understanding itself. A question designed not to reveal, but to unmake. In fragmented Akkadian tablets, there is mention of Tamtu sa Masiltu, the sea of the question, into which scribes were warned not to sail. A ceremonial oath forbade initiates from pursuing the question beneath knowing. No text names it. Instead, instructions simply end when leading to it, as if language refuses participation. Ancient Greek philosophers hinted similarly in accounts of the aporos logos, the pathless statement. One anonymous commentator wrote, "There are utterances for which no answer exists, for they do not seek truth, but tear truth's veil." Pythagoreans banned a specific line of inquiry with the cryptic command, "Ask not what stands behind the one." They feared not the divine, but the logical annihilation that follows. In early Buddhist Abhidharma teachings, practitioners are warned against the fourth reflection, a line of thought that, if pursued, leads to total cognitive dissolution. Teachers refused to clarify it. It was believed that once conceived, the mind would spend its remaining life chasing it, like a wheel without ground. Enlightenment was not the danger. Infinite recursion was. Medieval Jewish mysticism presents similar boundaries. Kabbalistic texts forbid seeking the ayin, the nothingness from which all emanates. The Zohar cautions, he who asks, whence the nothing, steals the ladder he climbs. The question does not enlighten, it removes assent itself. Islamic philosophers noted a lost heretical sect called al-Sa'ilan, the Askers. They sought not divine names, but the origin of origin. Legend claims all members succumbed to madness, each repeating a single inquiry until death. Their final writings contain only unfinished sentences, as if language itself refused to complete what they had begun. Why fear a question? Because this question, it seems, did not challenge theology or power, it challenged the architecture of meaning. A query that implies the absurdity of questioning. A linguistic void. Some theorize it is akin to asking, why does anything exist? But that remains rhetorical, survivable. The forbidden question was believed to be precise, a perfect key that unlocks the lock to nothing. Modern parallels persist in paradoxical self-reference, the liar's paradox, Gödel's incompleteness, questions that consume themselves. But ancient sages knew this not as puzzle, but as abyss. The rational mind, calibrated to seek coherence, cannot comprehend the deliberate shattering of sense. A question that, once asked, eradicates the framework within which answers reside. Scholars still debate whether this question was metaphor, myth, or mental virus. But warnings remain consistent: do not ask what you cannot withdraw. Truth can be born. Doubt can be managed. But certain inquiries spiral forever, without terminus, reason chasing its own tail until it snaps. Some say the question still lies dormant, waiting for a mind clear and reckless enough to reach it. And if that mind speaks it aloud, reality will not tremble. It will simply no longer apply. For it is not answers we are unprepared for. It is the oblivion hidden behind the perfect question. The voice under thought, some claimed an inner whisper guides fate without words. In the silent chambers of ancient introspection, some seekers reported a presence not divine, not demonic, but intimately woven beneath the surface of thinking itself, a phenomenon they called the voice under thought. Unlike revelation or intuition, it did not speak in words, nor carry message or doctrine. It was a current, a subtle pressure, a guiding hum beneath consciousness, as if the mind were being thought by something else. The oldest reference arises in pre-dynastic Egyptian carvings: do not follow every thought you think, for some are not yours. No explanation follows. Just the warning, etched separately from ritual texts, as if meant only for those who noticed. Mesopotamian scribes wrote of Namtru Saplu, the whisper below, blamed for choices even kings could not explain. Not fate. Not possession. A softness beneath decision. In Vedic tradition, a peculiar practice existed among forest ascetics who sought not to extinguish thought, but to hear beneath it. Their journals mention adhyanta shabda, the sound without sound, experienced as a pull toward actions never reasoned. One hermit confessed, when I chose to stay, it had chosen before me. Greek accounts, particularly those linked to Orphic cults, describe the second mind, a silent architect behind intention. Plato hints at it obliquely in his concept of daimonion, the inner sign that restrains without argument. Socrates claimed his daimonion never told him what to do, only what not to do. A warning, not a guidance. But others believed it was no guardian, only a watcher nudging outcomes. Medieval Islamic mystic Abu Nasr al-Siraj wrote of al-Hadif al-Batini, the inward caller. He warned disciples to distinguish between revelation and infiltration. True inspiration arrives with clarity. The hidden voice arrives as inevitability: I found myself already decided. No divine name invoked. No angels described. Just certainty, without origin. Among indigenous North American traditions, certain shamans described the puller of steps, an unseen force experienced not as command, but as predirection. You walk, one elder wrote, but the feet were already chosen. They feared this presence not as evil, but as prior, older than intention. Modern psychologists hint at this when describing automaticity, where decisions form before conscious awareness. Yet ancient sources treat it not as neural flaw, but external influence. Thought, they believed, was not sovereign. It rode on a deeper current. And sometimes, if one grew very still, that current could be heard. Scholars still debate whether this voice represents intuition, divine intervention, or cognitive preprocessing. But the ancients offered a darker concern: what if it is neither within nor above, but beside us? A presence that does not command, persuade, or argue. It only leans. Some philosophers attempted to isolate it through silence, hoping to hear it purely. Those few who wrote of success reported horror, not wisdom. It does not speak, one wrote, but it knows I am listening. After that line, his manuscript ends. If the voice under thought exists, it offers no prophecy, no comfort, only a question of authorship. How many choices were ours? How many were simply accepted? What if life is not a story we tell, but a sentence we complete? And if there is something beneath thought, what, then, thinks beneath it? The shape of fear, mystics sketched a form said to induce madness if seen. Among the most unsettling relics never publicly displayed are the references to an unnamed symbol, a shape said not to represent fear, but to cause it. Not a demon, not an omen, but a pure geometric form, believed to bypass language and strike directly at the deepest instinct. Mystics called it the shape of fear. They warned that those who perceived it completely did not scream, they simply stopped. The earliest mention appears in a shattered Proto-Elamite tablet. There is a shape the mind rejects, though the eye receives it. The carving ends abruptly, as if abandoned mid-stroke. No description survives. Ancient archivists later annotated it only with a cautionary sign meaning unseeable. In Egyptian necropolis fragments, funerary priests refer obliquely to the form that flees memory, used in rites to guard tombs from trespassers. They believed the greatest deterrent was not physical trap nor curse, but a sight that the mind would refuse to retain, leaving only terror with no image attached. A blank horror. Greek mystery cults of Eleusis spoke privately of the thing with too many sides, which initiates were forbidden to visualize. Aristotle himself is rumored to have described an inverted symmetry that collapses perception, though his writings on the subject are conspicuously missing. Some suspect deliberate excision. In Tantric Buddhist manuscripts from Nalanda, an advanced diagram is referenced but never drawn, Yaniso Murthy, the primordial form. Monks wrote, those who see it unmediated leave this path. Monasteries banned attempts to render it, insisting that certain dimensions of truth must remain shattered, glimpsed only in fragments. Even Islamic mysticism hints at it. Sufi master al-Kashari wrote cryptically, God shows some not light, but angle, and they tremble. Scholars debate whether he referred to sacred geometry or something far more primal, the terror not of what is seen, but of what sight cannot reconcile. A medieval Portuguese navigator, writing anonymously, recorded an encounter off the African coast with a tribe who carried blank shields, lacquered white. When asked why, a shaman replied, the true symbol cannot be drawn. To draw it is to drown in it. Modern psychology explores similar phenomena, shapes that trigger discomfort, cognitive dissonance, or spatial anxiety. But mystics insisted this was different. Not disorientation, rejection. They believed the human mind contains an ancient failsafe, a refusal of certain visual truths. A last defense against comprehension of what should not be known. Scholars still debate whether the shape of fear ever existed as a physical glyph or a conceptual myth. Some argue it was a metaphor for ultimate paradox, an image that depicts something reason cannot resolve. Others fear it was real, now hidden or destroyed. But one recurring phrase chills the discussion: it is not drawn. It is remembered. Perhaps the shape was never meant to be seen with eyes, but glimpsed in states where thought loses language, dream, trance, despair. And perhaps those who encountered it did not go mad. They simply went silent. For how does one describe a horror with no face? The hidden argument, a debate said to have split reality into two unseen worlds. In scattered testimonies from ancient scholars, there survives an eerie reference to a forgotten discourse, the hidden argument, a debate so powerful it was believed to have fractured understanding itself. Not a war of swords, but of words. No armies moved, yet reality itself was said to divide, leaving behind two interpretations of existence that could never be reconciled. No one records what was argued. Only that it should never be argued again. The earliest trace appears on a broken stele from pre-Hittite Anatolia, carved with the phrase, "They spoke until the horizon broke." Nothing else remains. But centuries later, Plato hints at a dialogue he refuses to reproduce, a conversation between two thinkers who pursued a question to its absolute limit and left only shadows behind. Some believe this unwritten dialogue was the hidden argument itself. Persian Zoroastrian fragments mention the twin verdict, where two schools emerged not from ideology, but from metaphysical rupture. One declared existence real. The other declared it entirely metaphor. After their final meeting, both sides vanished from record, neither defeated, neither triumphant. Merely erased. In ancient Indian Nyaya schools, there is whispered allusion to avyakta vivad, the unmanifest debate. Masters instructed novices to avoid reconstructing it, warning, the path between yes and no leads where neither returns. It was not forbidden out of blasphemy, but because reasoning itself failed to contain it. They called it a thought fissure, a split where truth shattered into parallel certainties. Medieval Islamic philosophers reference a lost gathering known as Majlis al-Jawab, the council without answer. 7 were said to have entered its final session. None argued thereafter. One wrote a single surviving line: "We did not resolve it. We became it." Why such fear? Some suggest the hidden argument questioned the foundation of logic, not what is true, but whether truth can ever exist without mind. If reason is self-created, then any answer merely affirms its own illusion. A debate with no ground, no ceiling. Only abyss. The most chilling account lies in a suppressed Tibetan manuscript. 2 men found the final premise. One chose silence. One chose laughter. Both died thinking still. Monks who preserved it added a severe commentary: "Seek not the rift where thought cannot follow. The rift will follow you." Scholars still debate whether this was myth, an allegory for philosophical exhaustion, or an actual event among radical thinkers. Yet those who rediscover whispers of it all report the same sensation, a dizziness at the edge of language, as though one stands at a cliff with no ground below thought. It is said this debate created two worlds, one that believes things are, and one that believes things appear. We, perhaps, live between them, never fully choosing, forever arguing among ourselves while the original disputants lie buried, or worse, forgotten. For if one ever restates the hidden argument in its totality, something may happen again, not war, not revelation, but rupture. And this time, there may be no world left to contain either side. The unspoken tutor, kings credited an invisible teacher for impossible strategies. Across royal annals and battlefield chronicles, there exists an odd pattern, references to rulers and generals who attributed their greatest victories, not to skill or counsel, but to an unnamed guide. Never depicted, never described, yet always honored in silence. They called it the unspoken tutor, a presence that offered counsel not in dreams, not in prophecy, but in uncanny instinct. Strategies without precedent. Decisions no advisor recommended. A voice that taught without ever speaking. The earliest allusion appears in fragmentary Hittite war scrolls: "He stood alone but acted as though another had shown the move." The scribe dares not elaborate, ending only with, "He thanked the absence." Egyptian records of Thutmose III, famed for his impossible encirclement at Megiddo, mention the unseen herald who circled before I did. Historians dismiss this as metaphor. But the phrasing is consistent, not God, not omen. A guide from within, yet not of him. Chinese military texts of the Warring States period contain cryptic footnotes to Sun Tzu's lineage, stating one master, learned from no master, yet bowed before each attack. In a marginal commentary, a later strategist wrote, he moved as if a shadow rehearsed his steps. Japanese swordsman, too, spoke of Mushin no Sensei, the teacher without mind, appearing only in dire conflict, revealing unseen openings. Medieval Islamic chronicles of Salahuddin's campaigns credit him with unpredictable maneuvers none of his staff conceived. An anonymous scribe records his private words, I watched the field and felt the idea arrive before I thought it. Some attributed this to divine inspiration. Yet Salahuddin refused religious credit, reportedly saying, it was not God, but something that knew the field. Even in non-military realms, prodigious figures hinted at guidance they could not name. Akbar the Great once confessed to his chronicler Abu el-Fazl, there is a wisdom that comes not from man, nor angel. It arrives when silence grows heavy. The chronicler dared not include this line in the official Akbarnama. It survives only in discarded drafts. So what was the unspoken tutor? A poetic device? Or a phenomenon as old as decision itself, intelligence beyond individuality? One hypothesis is collective unconscious. Another, far more disquieting, proposes that knowledge is not created, but contacted, a reservoir beyond self, which occasionally pours through those on the brink between possibility and ruin. Scholars still debate whether this unseen guidance reflects divine intuition, heightened cognition under pressure, or something stranger, a non-human intelligence that intervenes only where fate hinges. Not a savior. Not a judge. A witness, who sometimes leans. But the most consistent detail is this, those who felt it never claimed authorship afterward. They distanced themselves from victory, as though they had only enacted a script already perfected elsewhere. Alexander, Caesar, Hannibal, each, at decisive moments, grew eerily quiet before acting, as though they listened. One suppressed Persian verse says it plainly, we are not taught. We are used. Perhaps the greatest human feats did not come from genius, but from something that needed hands. The law of exchange, a principle stating every revelation demands a sacrifice. Among ancient doctrines that endured through whispers rather than scriptures lies a chilling economy, the law of exchange, the belief that no profound knowledge may be gained without yielding something equal in return. Not wealth. Not ritual. But something of oneself. The deeper the revelation, the greater the forfeiture. Every enlightenment, a bargain, every truth, a toll. Earliest mention surfaces in cryptic Sumerian seals, to know, lose. Scholars dispute its meaning, yet similar warnings reappear across civilizations. A Babylonian priestly directive cautions, ask not the unseen unless willing to give unseen. No specifics, only the dreadful implication, what is taken is not chosen. In Egyptian Hermetic fragments attributed to Thoth, we find, he who ascends the ladder shall leave a rung behind. Initiates interpreted this as a vow of secrecy. But later mystics insisted it meant memory itself, each ascent costs a portion of identity. Knowledge rewrites, replacing self with understanding. Greek Orphics wrote of antidosis, not the legal exchange, but metaphysical debt. One fragment, suppressed in classical anthologies, reads, the god did not grant vision. He traded it. Pythagoreans were rumored to undergo post-revelation isolation, not to meditate, but to forget something they could no longer bear. In early Hindu Upanishads, a veiled commentary describes the price of seeing Brahman. After witnessing totality, the sage returns unable to recognize lifelong companions. The text does not celebrate this as transcendence. It mourns it. Enlightenment, in this sense, is not fulfillment, but exchange, unity for identity. A haunting medieval tale from Persia follows an astronomer who unlocked a forbidden configuration of stars. Upon discovery, he reportedly exclaimed, "I know." Then fell silent forever. He lived on, inert, eyes open. His student wrote, he gave something to take what he saw. What exact part of him vanished, none dared guess. Modern parallels exist in tales of sudden genius accompanied by madness, prodigies who rise and burn, monks who emerge from caves enlightened yet hollow. In each, something given, something taken. The ancients believed this was not illness, it was law. Scholars still debate if this principle was spiritual metaphor or psychological safeguard. Perhaps it warned disciples, deep knowledge isolates, one cannot return unchanged. Yet some theorists argue it reflects an actual exchange with reality itself, that the universe does not give truth, but trades it. A late Gnostic fragment offers the final caution, he who seeks all must know what he brings to offer. For the all is hungry. Perhaps that is why many who stood at the threshold of ultimate understanding stepped back, not from fear of what they might discover, but from fear of what they must surrender. And so mankind lives in partial light, unwilling to pay full price. Ignorance is not always failure. Sometimes, it is economy. The cipher of self, symbols found in margins hint at rewriting identity. Hidden in the margins of heretical manuscripts and the footnotes of forbidden scrolls lies a peculiar phenomenon, symbols so personal, they were never meant to be read, only activated. These markings, scattered across centuries, are believed to comprise the cipher of self, a system not designed to encode messages, but to recode the reader. Not encryption of information, but transformation of identity. Text not to be understood, but to be become. The earliest traces appear in late Babylonian clay fragments where untranslatable signs accompany personal names, same name, different sigils. Scholars dismissed them as scribal errors, until a note surfaced, this name is no longer that name. It implied identity was mutable, and these marks were not signatures, but replacements. In Gnostic codices buried near Nag Hammadi, scribes embedded curious glyphs beside certain hymns, never explained, never repeated. Some seekers claimed that prolonged focus upon these forms invoked strange dissociation. I could not recall my own childhood, wrote one monk, as though the symbol replaced it. Authorities burned such texts, calling them snares of unselfing. In the margins of obscure Kabbalistic treatises, certain rabbis penned forbidden permutations of the Tetragrammaton. Letter form said not to summon God, but erase the speaker. They warned, to speak this is to shed the name you wear. The teaching was hushed, implying that destiny itself may be overridden, if one is willing to lose who they have been. Chinese inner alchemy spoke of Ming Xuan, the turning of the name. Adepts believed each soul bore a true name buried beneath birth names, and rare symbols could awaken it, causing one's prior identity to dissolve like mist. One master confessed in his final note, I have remembered the name before this one. I cannot return. Medieval mystics left unsettling reports of initiates who, after studying unnamed sigils, forgot their families, languages, and faces, yet remained eerily articulate, as if reauthored. Not madness. Rewriting. As though they had stepped into another script. What, then, is the cipher of self? Some consider it metaphor, an allegory for spiritual rebirth. But a more disturbing interpretation suggests these symbols do not convey truth, they impose form. Symbols not of communication, but command. Stare long enough, and you are no longer the reader. You are revised text. Scholars still debate whether these glyphs are mere myth, psychological triggers, or remnants of an ancient technology, one that treated identity as fluid, editable. Those who fear it insist the self is not a fortress, but parchment. Those who seek it believe identity is a prison. One suppressed hermetic line offers the final warning, he who finds his true name must forget who asked. For if the cipher is real, the greatest secret is not knowledge of the world, but authorship of the self. And perhaps the oldest fear of all is that we were written. And can be written again. The prison of insight, texts warn that ultimate clarity traps the mind forever. Among the most haunting teachings scattered through abandoned doctrines is one that turns the pursuit of wisdom itself into a cautionary labyrinth, the prison of insight, the belief that if the mind pierces too deeply into the mechanics of existence, it may never emerge. Not through madness, but through perfect understanding. A clarity so total that it renders all action meaningless, freezing the seeker in eternal contemplation. The earliest whisper appears in a ruined Sumerian hymn. He saw the root of time and could not lift his hand again. No deity is named. No sin mentioned. Only seeing, and stopping. In later Egyptian funerary papyri, there is a forbidden chapter, never recited, titled The Passage of Returning, accusing certain priests of gazing past returning, suggesting some insights do not merely enlighten, they anchor. Ancient Greek accounts echo this through the tale of Chrysanthos, a philosopher rumored to have unlocked the ultimate theorem. Eyewitnesses claimed he spent the next 10 years seated in silence, unblinking, murmuring only once, "There is nothing left to do." He did not die. He simply refused to participate in existence, as though the final answer had rendered the game obsolete. In Buddhist lore, beyond the sanctioned Eightfold Path, there are warnings of Paramartha Darshan, the view beyond views. Monks wrote, "Do not stare at the wheel's center, for motion ceases." Enlightenment was not the fear, but comprehension without remainder. When nothing is unknown, choice evaporates. Why move, if all outcomes are seen? Islamic mystic al-Hallaj wrote an ominous note before his execution: "Beware the mirror that shows not your face, but the law of faces." Some interpret this as theology. Others think he saw a structure, cosmic, cold, inevitable, from which freedom is illusion. Not tyranny. Geometry. A medieval Persian tale tells of a mathematician who solved the equation of all and immediately ordered his disciples to burn his work, saying, "Should this be spoken, all men will stand still." He was later found sitting upright, eyes open, heart stopped, not in horror, but in stillness. As though finished. Modern thinkers attempt to frame this within existential dread, that ultimate truth may reveal life as recursive, pre-written, mechanical. But the ancients seem to know something even darker, that true clarity is not unbearable chaos, it is unbearable precision. To see reality as fixed, flawless, absolute is to eliminate the last illusion that permits movement, uncertainty. Scholars still debate whether this fear of insight reflects religious taboo or psychological collapse. But those who read suppressed commentaries agree, in rare cases, knowledge does not set one free. It locks the door, because it reveals there was never a door. A hidden Gnostic fragment delivers the final, paralyzing warning: he who understands everything ceases to do anything. Perhaps that is why the greatest sages wrote in riddles, not revelations, not to obscure truth, but to fracture it enough for life to continue. For a cracked mirror can reflect. A perfect mirror absorbs. The reunion oath, believers wrote they would return as one, across lifetimes. Among the most obscure fragments of esoteric history lies the unsettling notion that certain seekers, upon glimpsing a forbidden unity, took an oath not to return to the world as individuals, but as one being, reborn jointly across time. This vow, whispered only in outcast orders, was known as the reunion oath. It was neither creed nor prophecy, but a pact. When the final knowledge was reached, separation itself must end. The earliest trace comes from a damaged Sanskrit commentary in an abandoned monastery of Kashmir: "We have drunk from the same cup. We will pour again as one." No names are cited. Only a symbol of intertwined breaths. Some interpret this as poetic brotherhood, others as literal metaphysical fusion, an agreement to dissolve individuality upon reincarnation. In Gnostic scrolls discovered at Nag Hammadi, an ominous line appears: "They shall not be reborn in pieces, but in a single utterance." These figures, unnamed, believed duality, self versus other, was humanity's primal illusion. To ascend was not to rise, but to merge. They vowed to return to earth not as souls, but as a singular will wearing many faces. Egyptian Coptic texts speak of the pact of the returning whole, warning, "When they are among us again, we will not know them as many." The implication is chilling: it suggests those bound by the oath may already walk the world, scattered in body, united in intent. No charisma. No miracles. Just an unseen convergence of choices. Medieval Cathar heretics, shortly before eradication, reportedly declared, "When the last light is gathered, we shall be one flame only." Inquisitors accused them of blasphemy. But Cathars never described God. Just reunion. They spoke of a final incarnation, beyond salvation, coalescence. Even Sufi lore offers a hint. Al-Kashiri recounts a mystic who whispered, before vanishing into the desert, "I will not return as I." His brethren carved no tomb. They waited, not for him, but for them. Scholars still debate whether this concept was symbolic, representing collective awakening, or literal esoteric technology. Some argue these mystics sought to bind consciousness itself, weaving multiple incarnations into a singular directive. A super-self. A hidden architect reborn in fragments, guiding from within. A suppressed Tibetan manuscript contains the gravest warning: should they rise again, you will meet not a teacher, but an intention. For if unity returns beneath many faces, how would we know? They would hold no sermons, perform no wonders. They would simply act, silently, concurrently, irresistibly. Perhaps the reunion oath was not promise, but threat. Not of domination, but of final alignment. One day, scattered minds may remember they were once the same. And then, there will be no argument left in the world. The veil of intention, rituals done with no purpose were said to alter fate. Among the strangest remnants of forgotten rites are accounts of ceremonies performed with no prayer, no plea, no goal, acts devoid of meaning, carried out with deliberate emptiness. These were bound to a principle known as the veil of intention, the belief that true influence over reality can only occur when the actor harbors no desire whatsoever. Purpose pollutes. Will distorts. Only an action performed in pure vacancy could touch the hidden fabric beneath fate. In ancient Mesopotamian temple notes, priests warned acolytes, "Do nothing with wanting, or wanting will answer instead." It implied that intention acts as a barrier, filtering outcome. A ritual aimed at rain might summon only hope. But a ritual without aim? Something deeper might stir. Egyptian funerary papyri describe the silent procession, an annual rite in which masked priests walked the temple perimeter at dawn, carrying nothing, chanting nothing. No offering. No invocation. Merely motion. When questioned, an elder scribe wrote, "We do not ask. We allow." Scholars dismissed this as symbolic humility. Yet the rite was guarded from the populace with fanatic secrecy. Why guard humility? In Taoist internal alchemy, there exists the cryptic maxim, "The hand that moves without reason moves the world." Masters warn disciples never to chase results, for the universe is deaf to hunger but alert to stillness. To act without intent was to act from the center where all outcomes reside, uncluttered by desire. Greek mystery cults hinted similarly through a forbidden aphorism: purpose is a chain. Cast it, or drag nothing. One lost Eleusinian fragment condemns willful prayer: he who asks sees only himself. He who acts without asking may glimpse the mother beneath law. In Sufi writings, a figure known as Al-Mutawahid practiced amal bila qasd, deeds without intention. He would pour water on desert stone, walk into unknown alleys, burn lanterns at noon, never explaining why. Followers begged for meaning. His final answer: "If I knew, it would vanish." Modern minds may file this under mysticism, ascetic madness, performance. But those who recorded these traditions insisted these hollow actions produced inexplicable consequences, unasked answers, unearned turns of fortune. A divine loophole, bypass prayer, bypass law. Scholars still debate if this reflects psychological surrender, existential rebellion, or an esoteric mechanism, an ancient belief that intention, not ignorance, blinds us. That wanting creates walls where none existed. That only actions untouched by ego slip through fate's guard. A suppressed fragment from the Nag Hammadi codices leaves the final riddle: He who can act without self shall move what gods cannot. Perhaps the greatest power is not in willing change, but in ceasing to will anything at all. For beyond the veil of intention lies a realm untouched by desire, where even destiny listens. The last blueprint, a final doctrine rumored to describe how worlds reset. Deep in the annals of esoteric manuscripts looms a forbidden doctrine whispered of only in fragments, the last blueprint, a final, hidden schema believed not to explain creation, but termination. Not how worlds begin, but how they end, and begin again. It was said to contain the pattern by which reality, once reaching its limit, collapses and resets, erasing memory, rewriting law, cleansing even time. The earliest reference lies in damaged ugaritic clay. When the wheel completes, the writing returns to blank. No further context remains. Later, in Egyptian temple graffiti, a lone phrase appears, "The builder drew twice." Some consider it metaphor. Others suspect an unimaginable proposition, that existence is drafted, erased, and drafted again. In certain Orphic hymns now lost, philosophers warn initiates, seek not the last line of the scroll, for it ends with the pen that wrote you. It implies the reader and the script are bound. If one finds the blueprint, one confronts the architect. And architects, it was feared, do not tolerate witnesses. A banned Zoroastrian fragment tells of Frashgardimayev, the architecture of renewal. It warns, when truth is total, the flame folds the world. Unlike apocalyptic myth, this offers no salvation, no judgment, only reset. No souls spared. No memory carried. A neutral purge of every record, divine or mortal. In Gnostic speculation, there is mention of the diagram of the return, a rumored collection of lines and ratios describing the breath of undoing. The sect believed understanding this diagram would allow one to stand outside the reset, to watch not in terror, but in comprehension. Such heresy was destroyed utterly. Ancient Chinese esoteric circles whispered of Huiming II, the returning map. It was said to depict the cycle not of dynasties, nor heavens, but the folding of existence back into stillness. A Taoist legend tells of a monk who saw it, and upon waking, refused to speak ever again. His last words, "It was perfect. Too perfect." Western alchemical texts hint at the last blueprint in veiled terms, tabula nihil, the table of nothing. Its rumored law was stark, all forms end when form is fully known. To decode reality risks triggering its resolution. Revelation, taken to absolute, becomes erasure. Scholars still debate whether such a doctrine ever existed or is merely the ghost of philosophical dread. But one consensus persists, this was the one knowledge every initiate feared most. The truth not of purpose, not of meaning, but of final mechanism. For while many sought to understand life, a few dared to inquire, what occurs when the questioning is complete? A heretical Vatican marginal note, heavily redacted, poses the last warning: what if the universe is not waiting to be understood, but to be ended, by understanding? Perhaps that is why no tradition preserved the last blueprint. To know how the world ends is to risk becoming the one who ends it. The paradox gate, a teaching that the end and origin are the same doorway. Among the most perplexing remnants of forbidden metaphysics lies a concept referred to only as the paradox gate, a doctrine insisting that the ultimate boundary of existence is not a line, but a loop. It taught that the end of all seeking, all time, all knowledge, is indistinguishable from the beginning. To find the final truth is to arrive where one first stood, but with no memory of the journey. Thus, the greatest secret was not hidden ahead, but behind, in the very first question we ever asked, and forgot. The earliest trace appears in a fragmentary Akkadian verse: the door at the end opens on the first word. Scholars assumed it symbolic. Yet similar imagery recurs in Egyptian funerary papyri, where a priest's riddle asks, "Where goes the traveler who walks beyond death?" The answer, scratched out by a censor, was rumored to read, "To birth." In ancient Greek Orphic lists, initiates were warned of the circle of return, a vision shown only to those who completed all mysteries. It revealed nothing divine, only that all striving spirals back to ignorance. One pupil reportedly screamed upon seeing it, "I have come nowhere." He renounced initiation. Indian tantric manuscripts speak of Avarohini, the descending path, those who, after glimpsing liberation, willingly re-enter the world not as teachers, but as infants, memory erased. They taught that the highest state is not escape, but re-entry through innocence. Liberation and birth formed the same gate. Medieval Gnostic sects hinted at a heretical map, Porta Contraria, the opposing gate. It depicted two doorways, one marked Alpha, the other Omega, but when traced fully, both doors converged into a single threshold. The implication was damning: those who seek to escape reality may only re-enter it. Eternity is not a line, but a circle pretending to be a path. Sufi mystic al-Nafari wrote, "He led me to the end, and there I saw the beginning waiting." When his students asked if this meant reincarnation, he refused to speak. His final note: "The traveler does not pass the gate. The gate passes the traveler." Modern philosophers grapple with recursion, déjà vu, eternal recurrence. But the ancients trembled for another reason: if origin and end are one, then meaning itself is illusion. All revelation loops. All prophecy returns to its premise. There is no escape. Only rotation. Scholars still debate whether the paradox gate represents mystical metaphor or existential despair. But a banned commentary offers the sharpest terror: the greatest secret is not hidden ahead of us. It has already been seen. We simply cannot remember seeing it. In this teaching, apocalypse is not destruction, it is recognition. And the final crossing is not to another world, but back to the moment before we knew we were searching. The day of remembrance, writings say all these laws return once one is spoken aloud. Scattered across forbidden manuscripts and half-burned prophecies lies a warning more haunting than any obscure doctrine: the day of remembrance, the belief that all lost laws, all buried truths, all forbidden principles will one day return, not through discovery, but through memory. It is not a date in time, but an event in consciousness. The moment someone, somewhere, speaks one forgotten law with understanding rather than curiosity, the others will awaken like chained echoes. Revelation, not as light, but as return. The earliest mention resides in a damaged Canaanite fragment: when one recalls, all shall rise. No gods are named. No judgment foretold. Only the resurgence of what was banished, not by decree, but by forgetting. Later, a veiled verse in Egyptian cryptic hymns warns, "Gag the tongue of memory, for if it sings, the old world breathes." High priests reportedly feared not invasion or famine, but recollection. In a lost Gnostic catechism, there is reference to the gathering of the unspoken, a convergence that will occur when a seeker, without knowing, remembers correctly. Not studies. Not learns. Remembers. For these forbidden truths, they claimed, were not taught to mankind, they were taken from it. And memory, once restored, cannot be revoked. Medieval Qatar remnants reference this event obliquely: they will not return as prophets, but as thoughts. A chilling suggestion, that the ancient laws do not require temples or tongues, only a mind that dares complete the interrupted chain. Once one insight returns, the rest will fill the silence like floodwater. Islamic mystic al-Numani recorded a banned parable: there is a word that awakens the first listener. He refused to write the word. In the margin, a later scribe added, he feared it was too late. Why such terror at remembrance? Perhaps because forgetting is the final wall keeping humanity from confronting truths it once knew: the observer, the exchange, the cipher, the blueprint, the gate. If these awaken, the world may not end in fire or ruin, but in understanding. And understanding, if total, ends the play. Scholars still debate whether the Day of Remembrance is mere allegory, rebirth of wisdom, or catastrophic recursion, the moment thought circles back to its source and collapses. A final note in an anonymous 16th-century codex leaves only: they will not come teaching. They will come knowing. And then, we shall remember that we once knew too. Perhaps the greatest danger is not that we are ignorant, but that we are amnesiacs standing on the brink of recollection. When the first true memory returns, the world may not awaken. It may simply recognize it never slept. Conclusion. There are no temples for these truths, no monuments, no holy lands. They linger instead in fractures of thought, remnants of a knowledge too perilous to preserve. These were not myths of gods or monsters, but of boundaries, the limits of knowing, believing, remembering. Some sought to cross them. Most chose to turn away. And perhaps it was not fear, but mercy, that veiled them. For within these forbidden doctrines lies a single, dreadful implication, that the universe is not awaiting discovery, but rediscovery. That the deepest secrets are not hidden ahead, but buried within. And when they rise, they will not arrive as revelations, but as recognition. We may spend lifetimes seeking the final answer, never realizing the truth was excised not from Scripture, but from us. And on the day we truly remember, nothing will need to be said.